4:06 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese. Thanks for being with us here on WMAL. So much to talk about. Let's welcome on into the program our old friend Hans Von Spakovsky, manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative and senior legal fellow at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. And Hans, always great to have you on WMAL. I've got to ask, this story just came out, so I'm going to have to ask you to bear with me. This is the headline from the Washington Examiner. You know that the document that was leaked online last night on the clerk's office website, well, now, and turns out that was literally a mirror of what was to come later on in the evening. Well, now, apparently, the Fulton County Clerk's Office claims that document was fictitious, and it was actually a test. Now, last night, you had the DA there, Willis. She sort of blew the whole thing off, which was like, well, I don't know what happens in the clerk's office. I don't know. She didn't, as a district attorney, she didn't seem, real concerned about all of that. I really don't know what to make of it. I don't work in these types of circles, but there's all kinds of theories about what actually happened. How big of a deal is it that document was posted to the website even before the grand jury had voted on all this?
Oh, I think it's a very big deal. And I'm very familiar with Fulton County because not only am I a lawyer licensed in Georgia, I actually used to be a county election official in Fulton County. And I will tell you that the clerk's office there has no credibility with me whatsoever. Neither does the district attorney there, Fannie Willis. And I think that's just another potential sign of the spurious partisan nature of this indictment. Look, Dan, I just finished drafting almost 3,000 word analysis of this indictment. And I will tell you, the polite term that I can use is to say this is one of the biggest piles of manure I've ever seen. And I've been practicing law for almost 4 decades. This indictment takes all of these perfectly legal, lawful actions that are protected under the First Amendment and tries to criminalize them. And look, you can see that when you read through all of the acts that Willis claims were criminal violations of the law in furtherance of the conspiracy. And what does she list? Public speeches given by Donald Trump, press conferences where people like Rudy Giuliani spoke, tweets. She actually says that, for example, when Donald Trump put out a tweet saying, "Oh, I'm watching the Georgia hearings of the Georgia legislature where they're investigating what happened in the election on a particular network," amazing. That was part of an overt criminal conspiracy to send out a tweet like that. That is one of the nuttiest theories I have ever heard. There just isn't any legal basis for all the claims that she's making in this indictment.
Well, I guess Hans Von Spakovsky is joining us on the Vince Coglianese Show, WMAL. So I guess I'm listening to you, and I've listened to others who are echoing what you're saying, although I love that you're getting into some real nitty-gritty detail here as we see this indictment. And is there any kind of accountability or, she's putting out all of these, I think you used the term spurious, she's putting out all of these claims, which, as you say, have no real legal basis. This is a district attorney. And so I guess the question is, okay, so these indictments are out and we'll see what happens ultimately. But, there's nothing really that the Republicans can do about all this except let the trial happen. Right? What else can they do?
Well, unfortunately, that probably is all they can do. Although I have to say, I think ultimately the defendants in this case need to file complaints with the State Bar Association over her because I think she is violating parts of the professional code that govern the conduct of prosecutors there. And one of those rules very specifically says that prosecutors are not supposed to file complaints and prosecute a charge that's not supported by probable cause. And I think she's violating that. Second, look, she reminds me of. I mean, first of all, look, prosecutors unfortunately can get away with a lot, even in the wrong. On the other hand, she reminds me of the former local prosecutor in the Duke lacrosse case. I don't know if you remember this. He was disbarred in North Carolina for knowingly pursuing a false rape case against members of the Duke lacrosse team. And why did he do it? Because he thought it would boost his political career in the next election. And I frankly think that's what's going on here. Look, Fani Willis is an unknown local prosecutor, one of hundreds around the country, and I think she sees this as her ticket to national prominence with her political party, and I think this feeds her political ambitions.
Well, when you talk about racketeering and the RICO charges, I mean, you're talking about 18, 19 people, everybody sort of working on Trump's team, trying to clarify some things that happened during the election of 2020. And as everyone remembers, back in that time, there was a lot of reports. There were a lot of things that were going on. And so the long-term ramifications, if ultimately this does end up with some sort of a guilty charge for Donald Trump, then that sets a pretty dangerous precedent for people who simply want to ask questions.
No, that is exactly right. She is basically saying that you're engaging in criminal conduct if you question the outcome of an election. And look, we need to point out, remember, the key to this is her saying that all of the claims that Donald Trump and his allies and others were making about the 2020 election were false. Not only in Georgia, but she names all these other states too, where she doesn't have jurisdiction over them. But look, keep in mind that, remember, Texas actually filed a motion with the U.S. Supreme Court asking for permission to file a complaint against some of these same states, including Georgia, because of their concern over the validity of the elections in those states and the irregularities that they saw. And 17 other states filed an amicus brief supporting what Texas was doing.
Yep.
In essence, Fani Willis is saying that 18 state attorneys general were engaging in a criminal conspiracy because they were raising claims about what happened in the 2020 election. That is how nutty her theory is.
So I guess then the question is, where does this go? I mean, it's going to go to, the what I'm seeing, Hans, is that they're thinking that this is going to ultimately, because it is Fulton County, they'll end up with a guilty verdict, and then it'll lose on appeal. It'll collapse on appeal. Is that kind of where you see this whole thing going, or do you have a maybe a different theory?
Oh no, I think that is where it's going. Look, neither Donald Trump nor any of the 18 other co-defendants, all of whom are Republicans, have a chance in heck of getting a fair trial in Fulton County. It is just like the District of Columbia, where the federal indictment was filed, just like Manhattan, where the local prosecutor also filed an indictment. It is a Democrat-dominated county, overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden in the last election, and there's no way that these defendants can get a fair trial, despite the lack of facts and law supporting the indictment.
Now, forgive my legal naivete. Can they ask for this to be moved out of Fulton County into, I don't know, some other, fair district somewhere there in Georgia?
Yeah, they have. I have no doubt they will file a motion for a change of venue to get it into a different county. But who is it they have to file it with? The judge, that's assigned to the case. And I just don't trust that a judge in Fulton County is going to do the right thing and move it to a different venue.
What do you think about this whole, this whole notion that she's going to prosecute all the defendants at once? Is that something that is that normal in legal circles?
That is like impractical. I mean, how can you defend? I mean, how can you prosecute 18 people all at the same time with all of their lawyers and everything else? And by the way, this indictment is an unbelievable attack on the American legal system and the way it works. Why? Because she has indicted Trump's lawyers who were providing him with advice and counsel and representing him before the state legislature and in court. That is, again, an attack on the way our system works. We have a legal system, an adversarial legal system, in which every individual, no matter what they've done, is entitled to a lawyer. And the fact that a lawyer may make claims that turn out later to be wrong or are ultimately turned down by a court doesn't mean that they are part of whatever crime or criminal conspiracy that their defendant committed. And yet, and yet she's indicting the lawyers.
You've heard the 1 hour phone call or 1 hour or so phone call that former President Trump had with the election officials. I assume you've heard it. And so
I've read the transcript.
So when I listen to that and when I read about it, there seems to be two different takes on that phone call. And I played some audio from it earlier, so hopefully folks heard it. But one of the things that people say is that Donald Trump is bullying these election officials. And I'm listening to this, and as I was telling folks earlier, Donald Trump is trying to clarify some things, but they're giving it right back to him. I mean, it is a very adult, contentious conversation. But Donald Trump, at least my take on it, Trump isn't bullying them. He's trying to clarify some stuff, and they're telling him he's wrong. It's almost like, when you have a disagreement with, somebody that you work with. I mean, to me, there's no bullying. It was very simply a contentious conversation where the president was trying to clarify some things, and they were certainly not shy in telling the president that he was wrong. So I don't see in my non-legalistic brain anything wrong with that phone call.
Well, there wasn't anything wrong with it. Your analysis is exactly correct. And you wouldn't know this unless you've worked your way through 100 pages of the indictment. That phone call is not part of the indictment.
Which I thought was fascinating because that's what everybody keeps in the media. They were talking about this phone call as, one of the core pieces of evidence, but you're right, it wasn't in the indictment. Were you surprised by that?
Well, I wasn't surprised from the standpoint of I read the transcript of that call, and there was nothing illegal. There were no unlawful actions in that call whatsoever. So I would have been surprised if it was part of the indictment. Of course, she lists all these other things that are also perfectly legal and perfectly lawful and claims that they're somehow a violation of the law. So I got to tell you, if she had been my student in law school, I would have given her an F in constitutional law because she clearly doesn't understand the protections of the First Amendment.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, you said it earlier, and this may or may not be our place to talk about this, but you said she doesn't know. My contention is that she does know, and she doesn't care because of those, career or political ambitions. Now, do you believe you know about the Alvin Bragg case in of course Manhattan? You know about this,
right?
Of these four indictments, I see a lot of these lawyers on the left, right? They say, well, this is the one that's going to take Donald Trump down. We got a lot of people on the right, such as yourself. Well, I don't know if you're on the right per se. I don't mean to, make assumptions. But, constitutionally, I have a lot of people that I respect saying this is absolute hogwash. Do you have an opinion? Is this Is this worse or shakier legal foundation than Alvin Bragg's in Manhattan? Which is worse, do you think?
I think they're all extremely shaky. The one in Manhattan, the Fulton County one, and the federal one we just filed in the District of Columbia. I think actually the case that poses serious problems for him is the federal case over his retention of classified documents down in Florida. Now, I do think that case was also overcharged, and I'll be the first to tell you that we apparently have a two-tiered system of justice now inside the U.S. Justice Department when they're trying to maximize charges against Donald Trump and yet minimize the very serious felony violations against Hunter Biden. It's a classified document case that actually presents serious risks for the former president.
All right, we'll have to see what happens, and we'll leave it there. Hans Von Spakovsky joining us from the Heritage Foundation. Very much appreciate you being with us here on WMAL. It is 422. 428 on WMAL. Dan Mandis here in for Vince Coglianese. Okay, coming up next, is Biden going to Maui or is he not? I don't know what he was thinking. Well, I actually know what he was thinking. He wasn't thinking when he said no comment when he was asked if he had any comments about the tragedy going on in Maui. Well, now apparently he is going to go. He just doesn't exactly know when, but he is going to go on a big trip to Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Details straight ahead on WMAL. It's 105.9 FM, WMAL. Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese. Appreciate you being here. One of the finer moments in journalism here in the last couple of days. This moment.
Mr. President, will you be going to Maui? What are you doing in Nevada?
That is Diana Glebova, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, and she is our guest now. And Diana, thank you very much for what you do. And obviously, the president didn't want to answer you, and ultimately he said that he had no comment on the horrific tragedy going on in Maui. And as somebody who is, embedded within all of these other White House correspondent media types, has there been, and we'll get to the latest development here, but has there been a little bit of confusion or maybe dismay at the president's no comment when it came to his, the question about whether or not he was going to go to Maui?
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. And I think you're exactly right. There has been confusion and lots of questions about Biden's comments, the no comment that he made on Sunday about the death toll in Maui, and also his lack of current plans to go visit the island. Today, he said that him and Jill Biden are planning to go to Hawaii as soon as they can to see the damage, to support those that have lost, the families that have lost their lives and all the damage that has occurred there. But he said he doesn't want to get in the way of current recovery efforts. And again, he's also been very silent on the issue, and he's faced a lot of criticism, both from the press and also from Americans on social media that I've been tracking. So on Thursday, he made remarks about the situation, but only at the top of his remarks. And then he went into, his just campaign messaging. And today he did the same thing in Wisconsin. He had a speech about Bidenomics, but before he made sure to mention Hawaii and even made a joke, I think, an apparent joke about the devastating situation. He said, quote, "I apologize because I try very hard to keep my speeches between 15 and 18 minutes, but I got to talk a little bit about Hawaii." I thought that joke was very strange, again, given the criticism that he's had for not specifically addressing the issue, and then also the no comment and avoiding the press on Monday and Tuesday. Reporters always go to the White House. They try to shout questions at him, and he's skirted us both times.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think I do have that piece of audio.
Well, I got to talk a little bit about Hawaii. I've been on the phone with the governor coming up here and the senators, and let me address that devastating wildfires, some of which are still burning in Hawaii. They've claimed the lives of 99 people so far.
Well, it's interesting. He does sound like he's showing some passion, but you're right. In one of the previous speeches, he did it was almost like a throwaway. Like he didn't really want to talk about it, but he was, sort of felt like he was forced to talk about it. Now, here's part of my shock is, this story about how he is apparently going to send, is it $700 to the folks there per household, to the people impacted by these fires? The headline from Newsweek. Joe Biden sending $700 to Maui fire victims sparks a backlash. They're saying, and I would agree, I mean, that's insulting. On this is with the fact that we're sending $113 billion worth of aid to Ukraine. What's the White House thinking there?
I've seen that criticism as well. Again, I track it on social media. And like you said, people are concerned that he's only sending $700. I would have to know that that's just the initial payment that FEMA has said. I think there will be future payments to the families on, the families that have lost their houses and their lives. However, I think Biden tweeting in a tweet thread that he's just going to send $700 to the residents in Hawaii did spark backlash on social media, with people saying and pointing out the amount of money that we've sent to Ukraine and abroad. It really did strike a nerve. And another reason that there's been criticism that I've seen is that Biden is also planning a trip to Nevada. He's planning to be there starting Friday, and he's going to be there for 6 days to Thursday. And it's unclear what he's going to be doing there, but he's going to be in Lake Tahoe, which is a very beautiful vacation destination. Again, it's not clear if he's going on vacation, but the White House has been very tight-lipped about what his plans are. I've contacted them several times, and it's very strange. It's the first time that I've ever seen the White House be so silent about his plans. And they just responded to me today saying that they'll provide more information when it comes available. But I think that because they've been silent, there is a reason for that, and they don't want to reveal at this time in the press of what he's going to be doing, because it might send a bad message.
So we don't know if it's a vacation, because didn't he? I mean, he just got off of vacation, didn't he? It seems like every time I turn around, he's, back in Delaware. He's, asleep on the beach. He's, riding his bike around. I mean, it's looking like he's spending a lot of time on vacation.
He does. And he was on vacation in Delaware for a week. And again, every time he goes there, he spends time on the beach with his family, riding bikes. He was also in Delaware this past weekend when he told reporters he had no comment on the Maui situation. And he also said he would be looking into going to Hawaii. So, yeah, I think just the contrast of him sitting on the beach or riding his bike and making these types of remarks has caused some sparks.
One of the things, I made the joke earlier that now sort of famous or infamous picture of Biden asleep on the beach was sort of symbolic of the entire Biden administration, quite frankly. And so part of me, I'm watching, Karine Jean-Pierre. I'm watching, the Biden White House, the Biden communications team, and President Biden himself. And for a guy that has been in politics for so long, it seems like he and his team, is tone deaf the right word? They're tone deaf. There are things that are crashing around them, including, by the way, they're trying to spin Bidenomics, for example, and trying to make it like this is a good thing and that people are not suffering because of the economy. And so it just, as somebody who covers the White House, Diana Glebova, by the way, joining us, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, and organization I'm a big fan of, by the way. It seems like this is a tone deaf administration.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what their messaging is and what their plans are on this. Again, I think it has caused a lot of questions, even from NBC. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell asked the White House yesterday if Biden has been told to not talk about Hawaii for some reason, because, again, even NBC is confused here. And I think that if he does take another vacation, or even if he has campaign events in Nevada for 6 days, again, I'm not sure what he's going to be doing there. There's no big events scheduled in the area in Lake Tahoe. If he does a vacation or campaign events, I think it's going to send a detrimental message about his campaign, that he would rather be doing that he doesn't put his attention on Maui. And this happened few months ago with East Palestine, if you remember, in Ohio, with that toxic train derailment. And for months, the White House and Biden were saying that Biden was going to visit the city. He said he was at one point going to visit the city sometime soon, or I think he said at some point. And that was in March, and now it's August, and he still has not gone there. So we'll have to see if this happens in Hawaii. They're just going to keep putting it down the line, just keep pushing it, and hope that people forget.
Do you think, first of all, I guess one of the things that happened is Karine Jean-Pierre shanked mispronounced and misgendered, some of the folks there, the senators in Hawaii. Were you there when that happened? And does anybody actually, the White House reporters, do you look at each other and do you think, should we tell her? I mean, how do people react to these press conferences?
To be honest, that comment didn't spark any kind of reaction.
Wow.
I think there's been mispronunciations from Karine in the past, and at this point, people just kind of go with it. Sometimes, of course, internally, I have my own reactions, but on issues like that, on mispronunciations, I don't want to say anything right there and then. But if, on issues that she refuses to answer, sometimes I'll speak up from the back and say, why don't you answer that question, and press her that way.
Well, one of the things that I find, fascinating and infuriating at the same time is when she will continue to, purport what I would say is lies or falsehoods, whether it is, this accusation way back when that the Border Patrol was whipping those Haitians, or, more recently when, she'll continue to say that, there is no evidence that, Joe Biden worked with Hunter Biden in his overseas business dealings. And it's just, for the layman, for the talk show host who's just, sort of a consumer of news, I look at the TV and I think, well, but there is evidence. I mean, there's witnesses, there's 1023s, there's whistleblowers for the IRS and the FBI. And so I think that, for folks like, me who just consume the news and we feel like we know the truth, it just gets a little frustrating when you have these constant denials. Does that make sense? And, when you're covering the White House, what is your perspective on that? I guess I'm looking more for your perspective. Is it difficult not to scream from the back of the room, liar, liar, pants on fire?
Yes, and some days more than others. Sometimes I'm incredibly frustrated because it's the same talking points. And of course, administration is going to spin everything their way. And sometimes there's literal misinformation coming from the podium. But I think that that's the job of the press, to push back. And something that I wish is that more reporters, if, for example, if she says a misleading fact, or if she spins, or avoids the question, I think it's up to us to keep pressing her. And for each reporter in the room to come forward and say, no, can you please answer the question? And you didn't answer the question, that is false. I think that would be great for the truth, and also for the American people to really know what's happening. Because that gives her power if no one presses back on her and she's just able to say any talking point from the administration.
Well,
for
one
people
of the
that don't follow the news.
Yep. One of the things that I love, Diana Glebova joining us, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. One of my favorite parts of the press conference is when one reporter will ask a question and she gives a talking point, and then another reporter will say, well, I want to follow up on that because you didn't really answer the question, and starts asking for clarification. And so that is part of the solidarity of the reporters that I actually like. And one final question that I have for you, and it's been a great interview, and I very much appreciate your perspective. You know, the White House reporter from Africa, Simon Atiba, is suing Karine Jean-Pierre after losing his hard pass. And I guess there's been hundreds of reporters now that have lost these hard passes. Do you have an opinion on that? I mean, there's some people that are saying that, you know, this is an attack on the press and so forth. I mean, as somebody who covers the White House such as you do, what's your opinion on all of that?
Yeah, and I think there's been about 400 reporters that have lost their pass, according to the reports that I've seen. And for me, I think what worries me is this could become a precedent of the White House further cracking down in the media. In the guidance that we received for the renewal of our White House passes, it did say that, you know, our White House passes could be revoked, as it happened to these hundreds of reporters. But also, if you cause too many disruptions on the White House grounds, either in press briefings or with the president, that could also be grounds for removal after 3 warnings. That kind of language concerns me because it is really vague. You know, what is a disruption? What is being, I forget the exact language, but, you know, what does it mean to be disruptive? The press is supposed to be disruptive and shout questions and get to the bottom of things. So maybe in the future, this can become even stricter and just have no objectivity.
Well, they say at least last check, at least 442 reporters have lost those credentials. And hey, have you been satisfied with the president's availability, generally speaking, or do you wish you had more access? Do you wish that they made him more available to the White House press corps?
Of course, I wish he was more available. And according to the data, he's the president that has been, in modern history, in the past few decades, the least available to the press. And the White House will always push back on this and say, oh, the president always answers questions from the press. You know, he answers shouted questions. He answered shouted questions last week or something to that effect. But according to the data, he does not. And for example, this past Monday, today, he just walked by the press while we have questions about the Hunter Biden investigation, about Maui, again, about the special counsel appointment. And he decides what days are convenient for him to not speak to the press at all. And there's also been confusion about him not holding press conferences. He's only had, I think, 2 major ones in his whole presidency, where there's a room full of reporters. Again, very low numbers here. And I think everyone in the press pool wishes for more availability, for more interviews, for more opportunities for Biden to just call on random reporters and for things to not be scripted as well.
Thank you, Diana Glebova. Thank you for joining us, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. A great conversation and very much appreciate your perspective. Personally, I will say that I think that they're trying to hide Joe Biden because as time goes on, he is having more and more evidence of cognitive decline. It is 4:52. 4:57. Appreciate you being here. Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. Man, there's so much going on. Coming up next, going to have a great deep dive conversation into the indictments coming out of Georgia. That's all straight ahead on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.